Here we go. Stand by, please. Rolling on 6. On
You're
6.
quite good.
Yeah, here we go. Welcome to a new episode of the Celebrity Archaeology Podcast, sponsored in part by the Built on Dreams Media Network and contributions from listeners like you. I'm your host, Adam Scull. If this is the first time listening to the podcast, welcome. And if you're a returning listener, thanks for coming back. Our goal is to preserve the cultural heritage of celebrity photography from decades past for the benefit of future generations. Pull up a comfortable chair and learn about the past. Do Celebrities Own Their Own Images? By Philip Hensher, courtesy the Independent newspaper, originally published on Wednesday, February 12, 2003. Philip Hensher is an Oxford-educated English novelist, critic, and journalist from South London. He is Professor of Creative Writing at Bath Spa University. With permission from the Independent, I am reading verbatim his article. Do celebrities own their own images? The defining moment of the Catherine Zeta-Jones, Michael Douglas lawsuit against Hello magazine came, surely, when a lawyer superciliously observed that no one offered him £1 million quid to publish photographs of his wedding. Ms. Zeta-Jones looked him up and down icily and said, "Yes, I can understand that." One soft spot for Catherine Zeta-Jones is partly due with her talent and her wonderful old-fashioned glamour, but mostly for her hard-headedness as a businesswoman. She is determined to make the most of her considerable assets, something no one should criticize her for. The history of her career resembles a military campaign in which no prisoners are taken. The luck of being thrust into the limelight at 15 as a second understudy in 42nd Street when the other two fell ill, it had to be 42nd Street, of course, followed by a major role on British television. A lengthy period of hard graft in Hollywood, a part in a terrible film, so that everyone could see that she was the best thing in it, and then onwards, effortlessly, to the top of the tree. She was lucky, along the way, to fall in love with Michael Douglas, and anyone can see that she does genuinely love him, but the whole career has gone perfectly to plan. The lawsuit, on the other hand, is not quite being conducted along the lines that you feel she would prefer, and she is being obliged to use a number of fairly spurious arguments in order to achieve a necessary end. In brief, the rights to photograph the Douglas Zeta-Jones wedding were sold to one celebrity magazine, OK, with the condition that the couple maintain full control over the published images. Another magazine, Hello, having been defeated in the bidding war, smuggled a clandestine photographer into the reception and subsequently published some unauthorized images. The argument, as presented in court, is pretty obviously not the real one. The couple are claiming emotional distress at this invasion of privacy, despite the fact that they had already accepted that the event would be covered by the press and indeed sought to gain financial advantage by allowing their privacy to be invaded. That is pretty well the only argument open to them, but it is not quite the real issue. In reality, what we are discussing here is copyright. It is universally accepted that writers, artists, and filmmakers maintain control and ownership of their products. Those are their assets in the marketplace, and if anyone sought to reproduce or exploit them without the owner's consent and without reimbursing them properly, they would be dealt with very simply and sharply. In the case of actors and celebrities of the more nebulous sort, The product that they have to sell is not so clearly defined. It is simply themselves and their own image. After that, the law offers very few ways to maintain control, even though it is clear that images from an actor's private life have a value in the marketplace that derives not from the photographer's skill, but from the subject's status. This, however, is something almost impossible to change. The copyright in a casual photograph of a person cannot be assigned to the subject for obvious reasons, and there is no way of arguing on these terms the case of the Douglas Zeta-Jones marriage. Hence, the not very convincing claims made of the deep emotional distress that was caused by these stolen photographs. But it does seem to me that the couple acted entirely reasonably and with a very careful assessment of the situation. Clearly, their wedding was going to be of enormous interest to the press. Equally clearly, the images that resulted were going to be significant assets to their careers and, in a sense, their property. Rather than attempting to maintain complete privacy through impossible levels of security, they decided to have limited privacy and limited media access and to control and exploit the images. I don't think there's anything at all wrong with that. It seems entirely rational. Anyone chooses what photographs they are going to stick in the family album and would choose with much more care if the photographs are likely to be seen by strangers. The alternative, in this case, was to get married in the atmosphere of a siege, and I imagine they thought that by issuing limited approved photographs on license, they could avoid the worst excesses of the paparazzi. In the event, it didn't work, but they were trying to control an impossible situation. What is absolutely clear is that from no point of view could this be seen as a couple trying to make as much money as possible from their wedding. Rather, they were hoping that a closely controlled deal with the press would allow them to maintain some measure of privacy and to go on feeling that their wedding, in the most important sense, belonged to them. Surely anyone can sympathize with that. The problem is trying to frame the law of copyright, which is what this is really all about, so as to acknowledge the way that anyone, even celebrities, will want their lives to appear to strangers. My thanks once again to author Philip Hensher and to Martin Hasselbring, Content Sales Manager of Syndication at the Independent newspaper, for allowing me to read this story. Thank you for joining us for the Celebrity Archaeology Podcast, brought to you in part by the Built on Dreams Network. Be sure to visit celebrityarchaeology.com to see many of our photos and pick up the link to the podcast. Love this episode of the podcast? Head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, and tell your friends. It would be much appreciated. Join us next time for the Celebrity Archaeology Podcast and learn from the past.